Grok, and I'm using Grok more and more. I got an actually decent little thumbnail going. It took a while to parse it out of Grok, but it's just something like, oh yeah, why don't I just use AI to create a thumbnail? Turns out, yeah, so I needed it to be sized for Restream, and it's now there, and hope people like it. So there you go. And just open up the chat, I guess. And also we'll have, I do have my Grok script ready to go. So let's do this, people. And hopefully everyone kind of likes it. Today's show is on post-Iran proxy networks, fission reactors for Mars bases, and the Artemis II realist power from Earth to the high frontier. So I try to take the view of a political realist on stuff that's going on in the world. We also do some interviews here. And yeah, so just, get Grok to kind of help me out. Yeah, I really love how he does the format. You at a tactical desk with triple screen setup, like I can afford that right now. Left post-conflict Middle East proxy map with fading thread arcs. Center glowing Mars base with a fission reactor boom deployment, and to right, the live SLS Orion Artemis II fueling at KSC today. Classified overlays, power balanced chest animations, Proxy splinter flow charts, reactor cutaways, cislunar space graphics, subtle underscore tense low drone for proxies, shifts to clean, optimistic sense for space, B-roll, recent strikes, sims on IRG sites, weakened Hezbollah rocket launchers, Houthi drone harassment, kilopower SFP reactor ground tests, SLS crawler transporter rollout today, Orion lunar flyby CGI, Mars habitat renders with fission power. How am I going to do any of that, Grok? Open cold on split screens, fading Iranian proxy missiles, arc over Israel, and today's live SLS fueling at Kennedy Space Center, and Mars fission reactor schematic glowing on red soil. Cut Uline foreigner, low lighting intense. And I'm like, could probably do that. Welcome to the Spy Guy, where we cut through the fog with cold tradecraft intel and zero tech ideological spin. Well, I have my ideology, so there is that spin. April 1st, 2026. Iran wars entering its post-conflict phase after U.S. and Israeli strikes gutted nuclear sites, missile factories, and IRGC command. Proxies are bloody but not erased. At Kennedy right now, NASA is fueling the SLS rocket for Artemis II, the first crewed lunar mission since 1972. Liftoff targeted for 6:24 p.m. Eastern Delta Time tonight, with 4 astronauts aboard Orion for a 10-day flyby, which is interesting. I was down at NASA a few years ago and got to take a few pictures of the Orion. That's an interesting craft. And tying the whole board together, NASA's March 2026 announcements of fission surface power systems, compact nuclear reactors for sustained lunar and Martian bases, building straight off the SR-1 Freedom Nuclear Ion Drive Team demo set for December 2028. Yeah, and I just remember reading on Chaos Manor, the late Jerry Purnell's old website, about how we could have these tiny nuclear reactors the size of a container truck if we only wanted to build them. And now we are. So that's kind of cool to me. Today, from a pure foreign policy realist lens, anarchic competition, relative power grabs, national interest above all, we dissect how Iran's proxy network survives, splinter, or adapt after the strikes. NASA's concrete fission reactor blueprints for permanent Mars bases and why they matter for long-term power projection. And Artemis II is not as feel-good exploration, but as a calculated move in the great power contest for cislunar space. No moralizing, no parades, just the brutal math of capabilities and interests that decides who holds the high ground on Earth and beyond. If you're new, subscribe and hit the bell. This is a full 45-minute operator level breakdown let's get into it. Also, if you want to support, you can reach out to me via my locals network, spyguy@locals.com. Graphics. Grok always tells me these great graphics that I only describe and read out for people. Graphics, animated proxy network flowchart, pre-war web versus post-strike splintering, maps with Hezbollah, Lebanon, Houthis, Yemen, Red Sea, Iraqi PMF militias, Syrian remnants, probability sliders for outcomes. First, the earthly side of the board. Iran's proxy network after 32 days of war. Realists don't see this as victory over evil. That's certainly true. We see a degraded but resilient web of non-state actors that Iran used for decades as low-cost force multipliers, denying territory, harassing shipping, and tying down U.S. and Israeli resources, as well as other people, as well as NATO and other people's resources, just the whole Strait of Hormuz thing. The Red Sea thing. We have these choke points around the world that have been developed, and now we just seem to have pirates always around those areas for some reason. Quick threat from the shadows. Strikes hit IRG's Quds Force leadership hard. Funding pipelines are disrupted. Command and control links severed. But proxies aren't purely Iranian puppets. They have local roots, domestic politics, and survival instincts. We'll break it down by the player. But I have been talking about that, how so much of RGC is not getting paid right now. So how are they going to have money if they can't pay their own soldiers? How are they going to be able to defend their own country? Like, this is a big problem for the IRGC. You think the guys at the top, the fat cats there with all their land and all their property in London are going to give a crap about the foot soldiers? Not much more beyond their nearest. They're just paying their bodyguards at this point. Hezbollah and Lebanon, the crown Jew, pre-war, 150,000 plus rockets, Iranian funding, battle hardened in Syria, post-strikes, bloodied from Israeli cross-border responses, and precision hits on supply lines. Some rocket barrages have been launched, but limited and often intercepted. Internal debate. Radicals want escalation. Pragmatists see Lebanese state collapse as existential threat. Realist outcome. Hezbollah fragments into more autonomous cells focused on Lebanese survival and smuggling. Yeah, you got to remember how much of this stuff. Iran's direct control drops from 40 to 60%. 40 to 60%. Yeah, Iran. How can Iran fund all these terrorism stuff when they're going to be spending in the next 10 years rebuilding their supplies and capabilities? They got too bad, Hezbollah. You're out of luck. U.S.-Israel interests to keep them sanctioned without full invasion that creates power vacuum for worse actors. Also, the fact the Lebanese government has been actually trying to get rid of them now, as opposed to letting them survive there. And you got to know also, I was watching a video about a year ago. Lebanon has basically replaced their own currency with the U.S. dollar. It's so deflated after that. They can't pay in for any of their infrastructure. But this is a big problem. That's why Hezbollah was allowed to take so much control in Lebanon. Houthis, Yemen, Red Sea. More independent streak emerged from the Yemeni civil war, not pure Iran creation. Yeah, they see themselves as more allies of the Palestinians and less allies of Tehran. Pre-war, drone missile harassment of shipping, Saudi targets mostly. During war, stepped up Red Sea actions, but constrained by the domestic factions. Post-conflict, likely double down on asymmetric naval disruption for revenue and relevance. China and Russia may quietly back them as anti-Western disruptors. Realist calculus, Houthis become semi-autonomous spoilers. I think they are that now. Cheap way for residual Iranian influence without direct cost. U.S. interests, secure shipping lanes via offshore naval presence, not ground commitment. Also, they got that pipeline that's bypassing much of the Strait of Hormuz. Like, that's doing well. Another group we haven't really, and no one's been talking about really outside of probably like certain spaces. Iraqi PMF militias and Syrian remnants. Fragmented further, some groups are already hedging with local politics or Gulf money. Strikes on IRGC nodes reduce coordination. Expect splintering, some go quiet, others freelance for cash or ideology. I think the ideology area is becoming less and less these days. These guys are just going to become more and more mercenary if they aren't already mercenaries already. Overall realist assessment, 3 paths ranked by likelihood. Path 1, 55% odds, network splinters into looser, more autonomous factions, franchises. Iran retains ideological ties and some funding, but loses tight operational control. US-Israel achieved degraded threat without quagmire, pretty much. Path 2, 30% odds, China-Russia filled gaps with arms or cash, turning proxies into hybrid tools against Western interests. I see this as more when, certainly Russia had played a large amount in the Houthi operation the last 2 years. But now that, or during the the Biden administration, now Trump's in, and Russia seems to be getting less interest in that, and they're gearing up for their main offensive come in the next coming months. Part 3, full collapse, invites chaos, refugee waves, new jihadist rise. I just don't see that really. I agree that is very low probability because we're just using air power. We're not using naval power. We're not using a land army. Like we've had with my interviews with my friend Kelly, we've had like a lot of stuff happen that dealing with that. America just does not have the shaping capability anymore to move a large land army into Iraq to, say, invade Iran. It's just impossible. Intelligence indicators. Watch Oman and Qatar back channels for proxy ceasefires, reduced Houthi Red Sea claims, Hezbollah rhetoric softening on resistance axis. Red line, no U.S. boats re-entering Lebanon or Yemen. Costs exceed gains when China watches Taiwan. Yeah, like I've said, I don't think China's invading Taiwan unless Taiwan does something stupid like declare independence. That's really how I look at that. This is classic realism. You raid the network enough to restore tolerable balance, then offshore balance the remnants. History shows proxy wars rarely end in total erasure. They evolve. Yes, that seems to be where this is going, I think. Now we transfer Earth power to space power. Smooth animation. Earth conflict map dissolving to cislunar sphere with US-China influence arcs. Text from managing proxies on Earth to projecting power where no one owns the sky. Russian realism doesn't stop at the Kármán line. The international system is anarchic everywhere, including space. Great power competition is now multi-domain. Managing degraded proxies on Earth frees bandwidth. The real long game, sustained power projection beyond low Earth orbit. Absolutely. That's where NASA's fission plans and Artemis II come in. Section 2. Fission reactor plans for Mars basis nuclear power projected. Yeah. It looks like they're going to be starting with a 10 to 40 kilowatt output scaling up to 100 kilowatts, which is a lot for what you need in space. NASA's March 2026 Ignition announcement laid it out. Fission surface power, or FSP, systems, compact nuclear reactors for lunar outposts first, then Mars bases. Building directly on SR-1, Freedom's nuclear electric propulsion demo. Tech breakdown, 10 to 40 kilowatt class, initially scalable to 100 plus kilowatts. High SA, low enriched uranium fuel. Heat from fission's Stirling or Brayton cycle electricity. I'm going to have to figure out what that stuff is. Deployable boom for radiation safety. Designed to run for years without refueling, indifferent to dust storms or polar nights. Mars-based vision. Phase. Initial crew tended habitats powered by fission for life support, comms, in-situ resource utilization. Turning regolith into oxygen, water, fuel. No more solar roulette. Realist edge, sustained power means more persistent presence. You control resources, establish de facto claims, and in an anarchic solar system, deter rivals with dominating the keynotes. Why is this realist? China is racing lunar and Mars ambitions. Solar alone fails in deep space or shadowed craters. Fission gives American continuous high density energy, the same physics that powers subs and carriers. Now projected off-world. Pairs perfectly with the SR-1's Freedom's ion drive for efficient cargo delivery. Timeline: lunar surface reactor demo targeted by 2030 under Artemis. Mars follow-up by mid-2030s. $20 billion moon base includes fission backbone. Commercial spin-offs for industry. Yeah, great. Like the fact that the world is finally embracing nuclear, the cleanest energy form, after all this BS from the green energy guys. Guys, you want green energy. Nuclear fission. Not nuclear, not solar and wind, which is devastating the planet. And those devastating planet, forcing the creation of all these rare earth refineries and just killing, frankly, an ecological disaster. We can't have that anymore. Risks: regulatory hurdles for nuclear launch, thermal management in a vacuum, public perception, but realism says the nation that masters fission in space with a cislunar economy and beyond. This is an exploration theater. It's infrastructure to relative power gains. Yeah, let's get out there and get some of those asteroids out there. You realize that if the average asteroid is usually 1 kilometer rock, and we'll have more iron and nickel and gold. If gold is usually about 1% of an asteroid, that is more gold than all of gold mined in the history of mankind. There's a reason why some people didn't want us getting access to this stuff, and they're the financialists who control the world, and they don't want us to get into space because we will be able to gut their wealth power and really bring in like space solar power satellites, and we can also do other amazing things, just like mining, manufacturing, getting most of the factories off Earth, and the fact that we will be then going beyond this one planet. We cannot afford to have all our eggs in one basket, especially with nuclear weapons. We need to get off this rock, and it's going to hopefully finally happen in my lifetime. Section 3, Artemis II, realist lens on cislunar competition. Lifestyle B-roll. Today's SLS Orion at Pad 39B crew: Wiseman, Glover, Koch, Hansen in Astrovan. Mission profile animation: 10-day flyby, lunar close approach, 6,000 miles, Pacific splashdown, April 10th. Cislunar map with U.S. versus China lunar South Pole arcs. And who here has even heard of these astronauts? These guys are going to be one of these guys will likely be the first man on the moon since 1972. This is not that type of mission, but that's something we should learn about these guys. These guys are people are going to be making movies, writing books, and making movies of these guys. We need to know who they are. Now the immediate play: Artemis II launching tonight. Crew: NASA's Reed Wiseman, commander; Victor Glover, pilot; Christina Koch, and CSA's Jeremy Hansen. First crewed flight of SLS and Orion beyond low Earth orbit since Apollo, like I said. They have a 10-day mission, Earth orbit checkout, then lunar flyby, loop around the far side, return. Test life support navigation, reentry at lunar return speeds. Proves the stack for Artemis III landing. Realist perspective: this isn't NASA's feel good. It's power projections, the ultimate high ground. China's Chang's program eyes lunar South Pole resources, water ice for fuel, helium-3 speculation. Helium-3 speculation, that's interesting. We got to remember that. That's what is believed we need to get: nuclear fusion, which will really open up the solar system. Beijing wants to set norms in cislunar space. Artemis II counters by establishing U.S.-led presence first, offshore balancing in orbit. Alliances matter. Canada board shows coalition building relative gains. Every successful test locks in U.S. industrial base deters Chinese fait accompli on the moon. This ties direction to fission plans. Artemis 4 Plus will use surface reactors for sustained stays. Watch tonight. If it flies clean, it accelerates the timeline. Delays hand narrative advantage to rivals. Realism demands treating space as contested territory, not a global commons. To kind of close out, but I'm not going to close there because I just had a good idea to extend this out by a few minutes. Proxy map fades from Mars base with fission glow and Artemis 1 Orion returning to Earth. Bottom line, from the realist lens, post-conflict proxy networks splinter into manageable threats. We offshore bounce without quagmire. Fission reactors from Mars bases from dream into persistent power nodes. Artemis II tonight is the down payment on cislunar dominance. Earthly restraint, free resource for space supremacy. In anarchy, the side that masters both wins relative power long term. What's your read? Proxy networks or fade or evolve? Fission the real Mars enabler. Drop intel in comments. Let this cut through the noise. Next week, deeper on, well, not next week. I'm going to do a show tomorrow. Deeper on cislunar strategy or proxy splinter groups. Stay shop operators. Let me just go. I just had to think. Who are the four? Tell me about the 4 astronauts. Artemis II. So just I would key that up with Grok there. Yeah, my one loyal JP is watching. And I have been getting more views, so it's not crazy. So this Grok thing seems to be working out a bit. And I'm doing interviews too. I was talking to my friend Owen, who I was talking to about doing a podcast last week, but his aunt died, of course. So sorry for you, lost Owen. And we were talking about maybe doing something tonight, but he also has, it's the Easter weekend. It's a bad time for a lot of people to test some things out. My two-way group was going to test their. We have plans for a trivia game, and of course, it's Good Friday. The guy who runs the show is like, "Well, I'm Jewish, so just blame Israel." Okay, ask Grok for them. So Reed Wiseman is the commander of the mission. He's a U.S. Navy test pilot and engineer from Baltimore, Maryland. Selected as a NASA astronaut in 2009. He's previously flown on the U.S. International Space Station during Expedition 4041 in 2014, spending 165 days in space. Served as the chief of the NASA astronaut office before named commander of Artemis II. He will lead the mission, making key decisions during the flight and reentry. Victor Glover, NASA pilot. Let me just scroll down here. U.S. Navy aviator and test pilot from Mona, California. He was first selected as a NASA astronaut in 2013. Flew on the ISS Expedition 64 Crew 1 mission in 2021, becoming the first Black astronaut to spend an extended period on the station. He will serve as the pilot of the Orion spacecraft, handling spacecraft operation and navigation. Wow, great. Historic milestone. He will be the first Black astronaut to travel to deep space beyond low Earth orbit. He will be the first Black man to circle the moon and may well be the first. Wouldn't that be great? The first Black man on the moon, first man to return to the moon from since 1972 would be a Black man, or perhaps this woman here, Christina Koch. An electrical engineer with a background in space science communication. She was first selected as an astronaut in 2013. Holds the record for the longest single space flight by a woman, 328 days on the ISS during Expedition 5960 in 2019-2020. She was one of those people that Elon had to go and rescue. She also participated in the first all-female spacewalk. On Artemis II, she will be the first woman to fly to the moon and deep space. Her expertise includes robotics, science operations, and spacecraft systems. Finally, we have Jeremy Hansen, mission specialist, a Royal Canadian Air Force colonel and fighter pilot from London, Ontario, which is like an hour and a half from me. I've been to London a bunch of times. That's really cool. So this being a joint American-Canadian mission, who knew about these things? No one's talking about this. This is why I'm talking about this. He's a Royal Canadian Air Force colonel and fighter pilot, elected as a Canadian astronaut in 2009. This will be his first space flight. He will be the first wow, they got so many firsts in here. Historic milestone. He will be the first non-American and first Canadian to fly on a lunar mission. How cool is that? His role includes mission specialist duties, supporting science objectives, and spacecraft operation. Why this crew matters. Historic first. First crew to the lunar mission in over 50 years. Can you believe it's been over 54 years since, or 53 years? What was the last mission? Is 74? No, it's 72. So yeah, 54 years since we've gone back to the moon. And now we're doing it. We had the first woman, Coke, first black astronaut, Glover, and first non-US astronaut, Hansen, to travel to the moon. The mission will test Orion's life support, navigation, and re-entry systems with humans aboard, paving the way for Artemis II planned lunar landing. The crew has been in quarantine ahead of launch and arrived at Kennedy Space Center recently for final preparations. They are highly experienced overall with strong test pilot and engineered backgrounds that align with high-risk culture nature of deep space test flight. If you want more, oh wow, God, this is so cool. Can I just say it? Like, we just need proud to, the song "Proud to be American," proud to be Canadian. Great. Like, we get so dumped upon by so many things going on in the world, and we get this war in the Middle East that we're talking about. But here we have like one of the most historic mission, a truly historic mission, about to launch at 6:30 tonight, and I'm one of the few guys talking about it. It's like, no, God. Crazy world we live in. Okay, well, let me go see my if I got time to do some reactions here. It is 3:40. Yes, I do. Let me go look in the history thing. There was an interesting video of Joe. Wow. There was a Tommy podcast had Joe Ken on, and I wanted to talk a bit about that and give a reaction to it. So, no, not copy invite link. Share screen. Yeah. Okay. Let me pull you over here. And yeah, so here's my reaction to.
We are recording on Wednesday, April 1st, 2026 at 9:03 a.m. Eastern. Hey, what a bad day to have you on. I'm going to be like, I had Joe Kent on today. No one's going to, it's going to be the worst April 1st joke ever. But obviously Joe Kent, Joe Oldman, both gentlemen I've known for a while. And Joe Kent is, I actually got banned from Twitter a couple of weeks ago for posting a bunch of links to my interviews with you, saying, hey, here are interviews with a timestamp on the bottom right-hand corner going back to 2021, and his message has never once changed. But, instead of anyone addressing that, I got suspended from Twitter. So nothing else has ever done it except that. So
wild. I didn't know that. That was what got you.
Yeah.
Did they actually say that's what got you suspended?
Well, I said Joe Kent is a hero, and then kept retweeting those. So
this is what President Trump
I wanted
had
to do a Promethean action since it just dropped now. So, oops.
And we are recording on Wednesday, April 1st, 2026 at 9:03 a.m. Eastern. Hey, what a bad day to have you on. I'm going to be like, I had Joe Kent on today. No one's but, instead of anyone addressing that, I got suspended from Twitter. So nothing else has ever done it except that. So
wild. I didn't know that. That was what got you.
Yeah.
Did they actually say that's what got you suspended?
Well, I said Joe Kent is a hero, and then kept retweeting those. So,
interesting.
Yeah. Well, obviously, Joe Kent, how are you doing, sir?
Doing well, man. Good to
My guess, he was caught. They considered it spamming. That's my guess on that one. I've seen that happen on Facebook back in the day.
Good to see you. Good to be with you guys. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for coming on here. Again, because very limited time, Joe Altman, I'm going to kind of hand it over to you. I know you really want to talk to my buddy Joe. It's also very confusing having two Joes.
Yeah. Hey, Joe, I've been following you for quite some time, more about the fact that you lost your wife in combat. So my condolences to you for that specifically. Man, you've had a kind of a wild ride over the last couple of weeks. Actually, probably a couple of years, but a couple of weeks has been a little bit more wild.
It has been, yeah. Honestly, I didn't know when I resigned it was going to get that this much attention, and then especially I didn't think I'd get this much positive attention. So I've been pretty humbled and grateful for all the support I've gotten.
So what's the outcome? You were investigating a lot of things. You felt like you were just getting roadblocks. The one that caught my attention the most was what happened with Charlie Kirk, that you walked in to investigate things and the FBI just basically shut you down. Is that normal? I mean, you obviously have connections to CIA and other institutions inside of the government. Is this a normal behavior for the FBI, or is this something you thought was just a little strange?
It felt strange to me. But honestly, my background being in special operations in the CIA, I had worked with the FBI before, but not necessarily on an investigation that involved the murder in America. NCTC's role in domestic terrorism, when there's an act of terrorism in the U.S., is to look for any foreign ties, so foreign entities, foreign individuals that could be involved. And so, as I've said on other shows, my view was that we still had more work to do in that regard.
Yeah, we need to get I keep saying that we need to get the FBI out of counterintelligence. Like these kind of stupid turf wars are happening, and apparently all the various different agencies, they all hate each other, and not in the way that the Navy and Army and Air Force view it as a rivalry. They all hate each other. That's what I've recently been told about.
There were still leads for us to run down. Again, I'm not pointing to any one person, any one country, but I'm saying there was still more work for us to do. And then the FBI came in and rapidly closed down the investigation, or at least blocked us from it.
Okay, so I don't know what's off limits and what's not off limits, and I have a tendency to get into the off limits area. But I saw a report that said that there were 11 or 12 or so foreign cell phones that were in the area when Charlie Kirk was shot. Is that accurate, or is that not accurate, or is it not something someone would have access to that information?
I saw those too, and I just know from what I saw in the investigation, then from dealing with large data sets of cell phone polls from a big event like that, that it's pretty hard. I mean,
it's difficult.
That was like a really specific number, so I'm not sure how accurate that report was.
And technically, if I were at that event, which I could have been at, my cell phone would be a foreign registered cell phone. So it's kind of funny.
Okay, so I have to run through a scenario with you because it seemed a little odd. Right after Charlie was shot, guy stood up and said, it was me, shoot me, right? Then you have a guy that's in town that is being deliberate about having this gun in the back of his car, and they're like, yes, we caught the shooter for Charlie Kirk. Then a day later, they're like, okay, the first guy was basically a false flag. Second guy, it seemed like an operation. It seemed like they were going through steps in order to create false flags. What do you think the opportunity is that Tyler is also a false flag?
Oh, the suspect himself?
Yeah.
I don't want to speculate on that. I mean, I think that's going to play out here in court. I think just because of my knowledge and because the fact that as many reporters have pointed out, I could be called to testify. I don't want to speculate on him. Again, I'm going to kind of fall back to what I said. I think there was still more work to do in terms of determining if there was any pre-knowledge or any kind of foreign nexus. But to what you said about the guy standing up and saying, I did it, but then also the people who had posted on social media ahead of time saying that, like, yeah, we think Charlie Kirk is going to get killed, in UVU on this day, pretty specific, and it sounds like there was foreknowledge. So to me, I have always said that I believe there was and is more work for us to do to determine just the full story, to figure out exactly what happened and who killed Charlie and why.
All right, so I got a lot of friends that are in special.
Yeah, for me, Charlie Kirk investigation, I think the Laws and Finances guy has got some interesting ideas, and I've heard some other people talking about it, and it just seems to be very much more corrupt. The corrupt McCain machine, I guess, is the best way. Arizona state politics had something to do with this stuff. You had all these millions of dollars flowing in from Israel and going into Charlie Kirk's organization. And then he had all the, much like James O'Keefe had, a bunch of bad actors on his board who were getting upset that Charlie Kirk was like cutting them off because he was getting into anti-Christian Zionism and anti-Israel, and he was cutting them off from all that sweet Jewish donor money. So I don't think Israel had anything to do with it. I think it was just people in his organization that were just follow the money, right? Let's follow the money and see where it goes. And it goes into the hands of a lot of bad Republican state actors who had a very good motivation to want to kill Charlie Kirk. Like, since he's died, they got like a couple $100 million in their bank. They've been really milking that. That's my view. I think that's what happened with Charlie Kirk. I think this
operations all over the world. And the more I talk to them, the more they feel like people are getting to that place where what we see in this investigation about needing more work to be done is becoming more common. That there isn't a whole lot of completion that happens, or that we're hemming up cases the way they used to hem up cases. Do you think that's a reflection of just the people the talent of the people that are in those positions, or do you think this is more purposeful? Because everyone is talking about it. Everyone is talking about the fact that bad guys are getting off and people aren't completing what they started.
I mean, it's hard to make a broad generalization, but I would say it's not a talent thing. There's very talented investigators throughout the U.S. government, and we have great technology nowadays. So I would push back pretty hard on it being a talent issue. You could maybe say leadership sometimes. But again, man, with the Charlie Kirk case, my personal opinion was that it was just, we were pushed off of it way too fast. And so I felt like we had more work to be done, and I didn't understand why there was such a rush to wrap things up.
What ultimately led you to resign? I know you've said this a few times before, but nobody's really come out and asked you the question. I mean, is it why? Why did you resign instead of staying inside the system and trying to make a meaningful change in the position you were in?
That's a great question. Twofold. Number one, I came into the administration fully believing in the agenda that President Trump ran on, the way he governed in his first administration, that we were not going to get sucked into any more wars in the Middle East. I saw that happen. I saw the way Israel forced our hands and the way that we allowed ourselves to be forced by Israel, which was not something I had seen previously, being a ground level special operations guy, a ground level intelligence person, but being in the role that I was in, having access to what I had access to, and watching the Israelis come in, create that echo chamber of senior level Israeli officials, and then the pro-Israel media wing kind of working in unison to push an agenda that was not in support of U.S. strategic objectives. That really opened my eyes. And so, number one, I felt like I was no longer effective where I was. I felt like over the last year or so, the group of us who was against us getting sucked into endless wars, we were progressively being pushed out, and we didn't really have a seat at the table anymore. So I could not make any more of a difference from the inside. But then also, once this operation kicked off, and I saw the body bags start coming back, and the families going up to Dover to receive their loved ones the way that I did, I said, hey, I can't be a part of this in good conscience, especially knowing the full story of how we got here. I remember probably about 20 years ago or so, I was on my third deployment, and I had come to the realization on that deployment that we were lied to get into the Iraq War. And I remember reading About Face by David Hackworth, who, if you do some research on him, one of the most decorated soldiers, he eventually did the same thing, left the military to kind of speak out. And I really respected that, but I was frustrated that there was no senior level officials in the government during the Iraq War who had the courage to speak out and to say, hey, this is wrong. We got into this under false premise, to try and reverse the course. And so I wanted to try to get us out as quickly as I could within the first 2 weeks. But once I realized we weren't being effective, I wanted to leave and attempt to influence things from the outside so that I didn't just go along with a war that I knew was going to be a disaster.
Okay, so that brings me down to the second, term for President Trump. We saw what he did in the first term. We saw the first 2 years of that was, they had the House, they had the Senate, they had the ability to make meaningful change. The obstructionists came from within the Republican Party. You were a part of the administration. You were right there, up front and personal. You could see it. What kind of Judases or Brutuses are we dealing with inside the administration that maybe are influencing or giving information that would push him in a way that he's, having us act as a proxy for Israel or any other country for that matter? But in this case, it's definitely Israel.
Yeah, in terms of our foreign policy in the Middle East, it's definitely Israel. The amount of access that we give the Israelis and the amount of access they have to our intelligence service, I think that's something that we have to get under control really, really quickly. President Trump's very, very inner circle, like the folks that you saw that were.
Yeah, so that's something I've heard from other people too. John Kiriakis, like, we allowed Israel to get away with a lot of stuff. Now, Five Eyes was different, though. Looks like a lot of Five Eyes splitting off now and not being trusted, at least with some of the information, as we saw with the Gulf. Why couldn't we get NATO allies to help out with that operation? Because their governments and spy agencies are full of people who will sell them out because they're more loyal to the Middle East than they are in Iran, than they are to their home countries. And that is a problem that why you couldn't bring in those coalition partners.
We're down in Mar-a-Lago with him that night. I think a lot of them are good Americans with good intentions, but they believed a lot of what the Israelis told them. And they pushed that agenda, and they kind of pushed away dissenting voices or people who said, like, hey, this is probably not in our best interests, or hey, we're pursuing the Israelis' goal here. What's our goal? Let's take some time to talk about that. We were pushed out. So I think the main issue is just the amount of influence and influence at multiple levels. It's not any one thing. It's not just AIPAC. It's not just the media. It's not just the relationships we've had long-standing with the Israeli government and their intelligence services and the donors, et cetera. It's the totality of it. And the Israelis play a very, very, they're a tiny country, and they play a very, I guess, a small hand or a weak hand, however you want to put it. They play it very effectively. And so letting them have this access, I think, is something that we're going to have to make a concerted effort to get rid of and to root out and call out, which is why my letter was so pointed. Because when I saw how the Israelis came in and got what they wanted, and then you look back at all of our wars over the last 20 plus years in the Middle East, we've been pursuing the Israeli strategic objectives.
For longer than 20 years. You can go all, this is a long-standing problem that goes all the way back to the Clinton era. But if you read the tea leaves, and I agree with you, what they did in the Iraqi war was completely it was nonsense. I spent about 6 years over in the Middle East and Africa. I learned Arabic so that I know if I get my head cut off. But the thing that I always
certainly it's true. The last president who seemed to push hard back on Israel was George H.W. Bush, and a lot of people blame that for him losing in '92 and not Ross Perot.
Went back to is that there was always a narrative, and no matter, we talk about Jaden Ivey. I know it's completely the opposite in the NBA, where he speaks out against this perversion inside the NBA. He's with the Chicago Bulls. They fire him, right? They're like, all right, we're going to let you go, because there's just one narrative. And the same thing can be said for our strategic objectives inside the military or inside of our administration. It seems like they always favor this one group, which is Israel. And you've been taking on a whole bunch of attacks for now you're anti-Semitic. You're not allowed to have free thought. You've been disciplined your entire career. You're trying to be objective about what you're seeing, and they just take full shot at you as if somewhere along the line you woke up one day and you just hate the Israelis, which I think is antithetical to what you've done over your career.
Yeah, definitely. And actually, I respect the Israelis. Like they're pretty good at the game they run. Like
Yeah.
you gotta respect the how deliberate they are and how aggressively they pursue their national interests. All I want is for us to aggressively pursue our national interests. I think the American people.
Now, that being said, those who've been watching this channel think that Trump is pursuing the U.S. national interest by taking out Iran and bringing peace to the Middle East. That's been the realist perspective that I've been trying to get across to people. And people think it's like this is in U.S. national interest to do the stuff they're doing. But that's not popular. It's just easier to blame Israel for the actions of like the financialist class.
Deserve that from their government. So yeah, I mean, I knew the hate was going to come, and it's really the easiest way I think for the Israel lobby to shut people down is to say like you're anti-Semitic. And I say over and over again, like I could truly care less about what religion the Israelis are. If they were Christians, I'd feel the same way. If there was a Christian nation that was able to lobby our country, as effectively as the Israelis, I'd have an issue with that too because it's a foreign country. But yeah, that's the game they play. Luckily, I think that effectiveness. I think it was really, really effective, probably up until a couple years ago. And every day that goes by and the more people that are called anti-Semites, the less effective it becomes. So even
the boomers' magic words are starting to fail. Like, you just look at Nick Fuentes, that I'm having a real argument about with myself, internal monologue about like how annoyed I am with the Roman Catholic Church. So I've started really, where's the League of Orangemen when I need them? Like it is on that scale. Like I'm going to be morally lectured to by a church that created the human rights catastrophe, which was the border under Biden. Like, give me a break.
With me, I think you've got Levin and whatever Epstein's lawyer calling me, a Nazi. But
it's funny,
general,
it's Epstein's lawyer. I mean,
yeah, it's hilarious. The guy who defended Jeffrey Epstein's like, you're a horrible person. I'm like, well, if Epstein's lawyer said I'm a horrible person, like I guess I'm doing something right in my life.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, so I just don't think it has the effect that it used to anymore. And so I do think there's more folks that are like, hey, tell me more about why you believe what you believe, as opposed to just being shut down by the insults.
Well, I tell you what. So there's a surge of people that will support you, and then the attacks against you will be relentless, and then after that there'll be this lull, and then you'll have a depression where basically you feel like you're all alone. I'm just telling you the way this is going to play out for you, and whether you're Kyle Seraphin or Garrett O'Boyles or some of the other people that came out as strong as you did to support and protect the American people. You're going to go through it. I went through it. You're going to go through it. And so in knowing, I think you probably know that, right? You've probably studied this enough to know that this is not going to be a fun ride. And even though the ride right now seems fairly safe, what do you think the outcome's going to be? You think we're going to be able to get rid of, you think that what you're doing right now is going to make a difference? And if it does, strategically, where do you think that difference comes? Do you think we ever are able to depeg ourselves from Israel? Because their roots and their claws go deep into not just the political apparatus, on the foreign basis, but on the national basis. They have a pretty good grip on, judges and governors, and I mean, it's pretty pervasive.
My immediate goal right now is to prevent President Trump, is to help President Trump see that he does not need to put boots on the ground. And then also for him to see that if he wants to reach any kind of peace agreement that's going to reopen the Straits of Hormuz, because that matters for the price of the pump here, which matters for all Americans, it matters politically for the midterms, is that he has to restrain the Israelis. So number one, no boots on the ground. And then that's what I've been lobbying heavily for. And then for him to also see that, like, look, you're going to keep getting blocked and we're going to be back in the same cycle unless you actually restrain the Israelis. I think that's going to be key, because right now Israel's strategic objective in Iran is to get us deeply entrenched in this, because they can't take out the regime without us. And so this right now presents the opportunity, I think, for us to truly expose just that Israel has a completely different aim than us, and that they plan on using us as an instrument and as a tool to pursue their national objectives. So I think we'll actually be able to expose quite a good deal in the weeks and months ahead.
Hi, Gary. Thanks for dropping the comment in the chat and joining.
Hopefully it's only weeks and months, and hopefully we prevent President Trump from putting boots on the ground. I pray that we do, and that he can kind of show that he has to restrain the Israelis. But this is going to be a long and hard fight. But what gives me a little bit of hope is that the under 50 crowd, especially the younger they get, they've kind of lost tolerance for us going to wars endlessly, us being influenced by foreign lobbies. So I think as we go ahead into the 2028 presidential primary on both the Republican and the Democrat side, I think this issue is actually going to play out in a very meaningful way with both the RNC and the DNC when they go to choose their next candidate.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. This is one reason why I think Trump thinks he has to do it now, because he knows he's the last person who can do it
for president. And so I just think the more that we can talk about it and the more that we can make it a critical issue, I think actually there's even a potential here for us to unite some left and unite some right to just say, hey, we don't want foreign influence in our government, because the Israeli lobby, the AIPAC lobby, they've just been exposed to just be so detrimental to our country.
Well, you just saw what happened with Bibi. There's a video out there of that's pretty incriminating for him and other people around him that says, hey, I can't even talk about this because I'll end up dead, they'll end up dead. So how does a video like that get out? Like they're talking about Bibi almost in past tense, as if they're just going to eliminate him off the chessboard, and you almost can feel it. Like there's this pressure going on in the Israeli leadership to kind of cleanse what's happening. And by the way, I know for a fact, I have family in Israel. People in Israel do not have an appetite for the leadership in Israel. They feel captured.
Yeah,
I know. Sorry, and I know this is the worst possible time for me to interrupt, because it's going to sound like we're just stopping for that reason. I told Joe I'd only keep for 15 minutes. If you want to keep going for a couple of minutes, Joe, we can keep going.
We can go for actually we get it for like 5 more minutes.
Okay, I just wanted to. I know people are going to be like, "Oh, they stopped talking once they brought up Bibi." All right, sorry, keep going. Yeah, keep going.
I was just getting started, man. I just.
I think you're right though. The constant state of political crisis that not only America has been in, I think it's been amplified like tenfold in Israel. And really, actually, when we talk about like the Israeli lobby, especially in the last, going back to the Iraq war, it was kind of the Likud party. I'm not an expert on Israeli politics, but I know that Bibi was facing a political crisis before October 7th. These are a lot of the issues that Charlie Kirk himself was talking about before he was killed. So I don't think that this entity, as dark and as powerful as it may seem, it's not invincible. They can't kill everybody. They can't ruin everybody. They can't defame everybody. But I do think this is going to be a time where left and right in America are going to have to unite to get rid of the foreign, Israeli influence, and then hopefully we get some support from folks in Israel too, who realize the policies that the Likud party and Bibi are pushing are detrimental for Israel as well. Because basically Bibi has a high tolerance, in the Likud party, they have a high tolerance for chaos and for suffering, and especially the suffering of their own people, because that gives them more political power because they want the constant crisis. So I think that there's a real potential here for all this to be exposed and for, the better, good, hardworking people in both countries to prevail.
It's funny you say that. Chaos favors the op, never favors the people. And Israel's been really good at using chaos as a tool. You can go back to October 7th, which you mentioned. In 6.5 hours, they had stand-down orders, do not, patrol these areas. And I know the IDF does not take 6.5 hours to respond to anything. They don't take 6.5 minutes. And in every community, you'll have IDF soldiers. So this is not a phenomenon that you can just explain away for what happened in Israel. So October 7th, how do you explain the fact that they basically let them have a free-for-all? And Bibi's talking about the fact that he funded Hamas, and he did so, to promote the country's interest. It seems as if they basically set their own people up to be in the middle of a bloodbath so they could use it to go after.
It's possible that the stand-down orders came from Hamas, I'm just saying, or Iran, or some other actor to tip off that. It's just definitely a possibility that's where the stand-down is coming down, and that would mean a terrible amount of lapse of security in Mossad and the Shin Bet. But that's always possible. I have no proof on that one. I'm just speculating why that happened, and there definitely has to be an inquiry into it. And the longer the war goes on, anyways, we'll see what happens when the next Israeli election comes through.
Countries like like Iran, Lebanon, which we should never be in Lebanon. That's the most ridiculous thing ever. And so how do you explain that? How do you explain the 6.5 hours? They can't even explain
really,
it.
I'd be demanding the answers to those questions. And again, that kind of supports why staying in constant chaos would benefit whoever's going to have to eventually be accountable to those questions.
All right. Do you think that they miss? I mean, I have to ask you a election-related question, but I got to ask you this question: do you think they miss the ethos of the Middle East, the culture itself? Because you can't kill your way to submission in the Middle East. It's not possible. I mean, the Afghan people fought for 20 years, and we had nothing to show for it other than leaving behind billions of dollars of equipment. So I don't think they understand the will of the people.
You had all the opium fields. CIA was running via Karzai's brother. You did get all that access to that going on. Like, I've seen speculation that Dien Bien Phu happened in Vietnam because the French wanted to keep the opium fields open for longer. Sometimes it does seem everything does come down to drugs.
People there that, they just don't. If you kill their family, they become the next wave of terrorists. They become the next wave who will just literally hunt you to the bitter end. It's generational. It'll carry all the way down to the very end, and you can't kill enough of them in order to do it because you'd have to kill all of them, which again goes against the idea of, or the ethos of humanity.
Yeah, I don't think there's a society out there that really you can just beat into submission. I think people have their pride and their agency. I think short of doing something like we did in World War II, you're going to get a rally around the flag effect. And this is what we long assessed about Iran. If we took out the Ayatollah, number one, the Ayatollah had a fatwa that banned them from actually developing a nuclear weapon. So him and Trump agreed on that. And this was a direct threat to the Israelis. The Israelis realized that Trump and the Ayatollah had.
Yeah, I just don't think so. I think this comes down to Praetorian theory. I don't think the Ayatollah necessarily was running the show anymore, if he ever did. I think the IRGC was running the show, and MOS which is the Ministry of Interior Security or whatever,
had agreed enough to get them to the negotiating table. And then they were worried about Trump's skill and desire to reach a deal. So they moved the red line, said, no, it has to be enrichment. And we kept asking and doing our own assessments within the intelligence community and with the Israelis and saying, hey, if we take out the supreme leader and we start killing the leadership, what do we think is going to happen? And everybody said, well, they're going to rally around the flag. The Iranians actually will not buckle to this. And again, the Israelis were comfortable with that degree of chaos because they
even the people that hated the Ayatollah still we're going to turn right back against, and nobody understands that. Like, you're still not attacking our country. We can hate them, we can fight them, they can kill us. But don't come into our country and do the things that you're doing right now.
That's why I was initially against this thing. Now we're seeing it through. That's how I feel about it. But initially I just said, no, we don't want to do this because we'll have the rally around the flag. But it does look like it's going to be, as I say in the realist portion of the show, where they just, they're going to go for the infrastructure and they're going to try and wipe this stuff out because they get as much of their capabilities and then reduce and force them to have to rebuild it at home in order to shut down the proxies. I think that's what we're seeing here
right now.
Yeah. Like, none of us voted for Joe Biden, but if an outsider would have attacked us during the Biden administration, you better believe all of us
100%
would have been out there, rallying around our flag, defending. Even I thought the guy was an illegitimate president, but he was still the president, so I still would have defended him. And that's just basic human nature. So when in January, when there was protests against the regime on the streets because of the economic conditions, basically we negated that by going in because there were people protesting against the regime, and there was a potential, and it probably would have taken a while, but there was a potential for the people actually to get rid of that government because they were sick and tired of being sanctioned because their government wanted to fund terrorism and do all these different things that hurt the people there in the country. But basically we went in and we started killing leadership, and now the people are like, well, I'm not going to buckle and bend to a foreign influence that's going to come in here and try and remove my leadership, by force through the barrel of a gun. So this is where I think the Israelis did a very effective job of selling President Trump a very easy formula. They said, hey, look, the protesters are out on the streets in January. All you got to do is whack a couple IRGC guys and the supreme leader, and this whole thing is going to crumble like a house of cards. It's going to be just like Venezuela. It's going to be super easy. We'll be greeted as liberators, all the same crap we heard before in Iraq. And he unfortunately took the bait, and here we are. We've killed off the moderates by and large. The Israelis have killed off a lot of the moderate leadership, so have we, unfortunately. And now what we're going to have to deal with is a much more hardened Iranian leadership to deal with that doesn't want to negotiate on nukes. They want to develop nukes. They now realize they control the Straits of Hormuz by force. So we've gotten ourselves in an exponentially worse situation than we were before.
And they couldn't even see through the tea leaves. They couldn't have predicted it, and yet it was so predictable. Matter of fact, there was analysts that were talking about that this was going to become problematic long before we even went into Iran. And for the week leading up to it, they telegraphed and signaled they were going in there, which made it even worse. I have to ask you an election integrity question, right? I've been in this fight for the last 6 years. 82% of the people in the country, 72% of the people in the country favor the SAVE Act. 82% of black and brown people favor the SAVE Act. Yet there's this congressional pushback from people on our own side, John Thune and others, to basically say that there's nothing to see here. Joe, we have more than enough data, information, proof to show that the elections are largely illegitimate and or fraudulent across the country. I've been involved with this deal for the last 6 years.
Yeah. I got the guys trying to tell me, oh, no, America's special. I'm like, guys, Brazil has twice as many people as you, they can get the election done in 4 hours. Crypto Rich pointed out, hey, if India can get it with its billion people, can get an election done in a day, why can't you in America? Why do you need all these bonus days? And it's because it's just crazy. It's just like you're stealing elections. That's what's happening. If your State Department can certify your own elections, that is why you are stealing elections, and that is why we're seeing this. And someone who's participated in elections who's had friends sleep with the ballot boxes to preserve the integrity of the election results, this disgusts me.
6 years, I'm a system architect. I could even draw out for you how they do it. I predicted what happened in Georgia in the runoff election in 2021 before it even happened. So knowing all this information, why is there a hesitation inside of our government to take the information? Why is the people on the outside know more than the people on the inside of the government? And why is it there's a hesitation to get to a place where we can have safe and secure and transparent elections? It feels like they're doing it because they know they want to be able to control the outcome and who's in what position in Washington making the choices for the American people.
It's hard to see it in any other way. I think a lot of the elected officials, they're not out there knocking on doors and doing grassroots fundraising. A lot of them are just juiced by a lot of different super PACs. And so I think most of them rightfully fear that if there were safe and secure elections, that the PACs would lose a lot of their power, a lot of the money would lose a lot of its power, and they would lose their seats. And I think that's like probably a bipartisan thing. I would like to be a partisan here and say that's all just the Democrats. But there's Republicans, like you said, Thune, and some others who probably are the same way. If they disagree with us, then why wouldn't they pass the SAVE Act? Why wouldn't there be just a massive outpouring of support from the legislature to actually make sure that we have one person, one vote, et cetera, and it can be traced, it can be verified. But anytime you mention it, it's like a third rail of politics that talking
conspiracy
about
theories,
elections,
misinformation, malinformation, right? And nobody believes it.
I have to.
All right.
Yeah.
I was gonna say I have to keep my word and let Joe go because he promised 15. I kept him 30. I just wanted to say before you go, I've been interviewing you since 2021. When I first got in touch with you, I had less than 100 subscribers on Rumble. For everyone that is just you can have your opinions about it. Hey man, you can go back and find the videos with the timestamp on them. It's me with 3 subscribers, and we're talking about no more endless wars, securing the elections, don't have foreign influence. So that's kind of my 2 cents on that, man. And you said you were surprised at the amount of positive reception. My parents, who I don't think they even know social media exists, were the first ones to they told me like Joe Kent just stepped down. I was like, what the fuck? That's funny. So. Dude, more people love you than you can possibly know, and for good reason. And so, not that you need my approval, but that's my 2 cents for you. But I will let you go. I know
your book behind you, book behind you, Joe. I've read it about Shannon. Great book. That is. And I read it long before I even really knew about you, if that's a thing. So it's a great tribute. So well done.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it. It's great to meet you. Thank you, Tommy.
Great to meet you.
Joe, as always, dude. Thank you, man. So take care, guys.
Well, that's the end of that. And we had a Promethean action update drop, and I'm going to review that, and then we'll call the show.
This is what President Trump had to say yesterday on what may be one of the final days of the current Iran war. All of those countries that can't get jet fuel because of the Strait of Hormuz, like the United Kingdom, which refused to get involved in the decapitation of Iran, I have a suggestion for you. Number one, buy from the U.S. We have plenty. And number two, build up some delayed courage. Go to the Strait and just take it. Tonight, he addresses the nation at 9 p.m. Most commentators think he's...
Okay, we're going to have an address from the president at 9 p.m. We're definitely having the fact that the rocket is about to take off. So it might be just about that. But but maybe there's a lot more to this.
Announcing ground troops that were headed into a quagmire and the end of MAGA. They're wrong. It's far more likely he announces a ceasefire and the beginning of the end of NATO, but we just don't know. I'm Barbara Boyd, and I've followed how the modern British Empire has profited off the manipulation of the oil and gas market ever since the petrodollar market was born in 1971. Today, I'm covering three things: why this war ends when Trump and his middle-aged allies say it ends, how the administration planned for this war and its energy outcome months in advance, and why the states and nations that refused drill, baby, drill are now paying the steepest price. But before we dig in, hit that like and share button. It increases our reach on YouTube. Let's start with something Secretary of War Hexes said at the Pentagon briefing Tuesday morning. It says the frame.
We have more and more options, and they have less. Just 1 month in, only 1 month, we set the terms. The upcoming days will be decisive. Iran knows that, and there's almost nothing they can militarily do about it.
The war is not spinning out of control. It is being compressed toward a defined endpoint. And that endpoint is driven by one condition the press and everybody else keeps missing. The war ends when Donald Trump and America's Arab allies, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Qatar, Kuwait, Jordan, and Egypt, the nations at the center of the Abraham Accords, are satisfied that Iran is no longer a military danger.
Yep, that's what we keep talking about from the realist perspective. This is, in order for the Board of Peace to work, I keep reiterating it, in order for the Board of Peace to work, you need to get rid of Iran's and its proxies. And that's what we keep covering here on this channel. Of course, now that if the war is ending, we're going to have to find some other topic to talk about. But yeah, we'll return maybe to more intelligence matters and definitely covering more on the space race stuff.
These Gulf states have committed trillions in new investment into our economy, the American economy. Iran has been attacking their civilian infrastructure for 32 consecutive days. Aluminum plants, desalination facilities, major refineries, oil tankers sitting in their own ports. That isn't abstract. These are the nations building the new economic architecture for the world with Donald Trump, and they have a direct say of where this ends. The president said Tuesday evening he expected a resolution in 2 to 3 weeks, or earlier if Iran makes a deal.
But we're finishing the job, and I think within maybe 2 weeks, maybe a couple of days longer to do the job. But we want to knock out every single thing they have. Now, it's possible that we'll make a deal before that, because we'll hit bridges, and we've hit some. We'll hit some bridges. We've got a couple of nice bridges in mind. But if they come to the table, that'll be good.
Which brings us to the diplomatic front.
Yeah, Israel wants this. No, all of the Middle East countries want this to be over. Like, I think Saudi Arabia has more influence over Donald Trump than Israel, okay?
While Trump was taking NATO to the woodshed and repeatedly stating we're about to leave it, his back-channel peace negotiator, Pakistan's foreign minister Ishaq Dar, was on a plane to Beijing to meet with China's Wang Yi. This was his second trip this year. They emerged with a 5-point ceasefire proposal conditioned on the Strait of Hormuz being reopened. That did not come together in a few hours of meeting. China is Iran's largest oil customer. When Beijing tells Tehran through Trump's Pakistani back channel, take the off-ramp, that message lands. At almost exactly the same moment, Iranian President Pezeshkian released this statement. We possess the necessary will to end this conflict, provided that essential conditions are met, especially the guarantees required to prevent repetition of the aggression. Iran's president said Tehran has the will now to end this war. That is the fracture.
And I've been saying from the beginning, we knew it was going to probably come. There was a deal being made with a civilian government, and they needed to break the IRGC. And now we're seeing the real people, the people who run Iran, their deep state, the real guys, the civilian government, those guys are the lead here, not the Ayatollahs, not an IRGC commander. We're starting to see a deal being struck with the civilian government.
Trump has been working. And this morning, President Trump announced he is seriously considering the ceasefire. None of this is chaos. It is a precisely sequenced military and diplomatic operation with an economic endgame that was in motion long before the shooting started. And this brings us to what matters most. But if you're seeing a picture that looks very different from the nightly news, you're right. This is exactly why Promethean Action exists. We cover the fading imperial great game from the standpoint of sovereign nations fighting back and winning. Subscribe to our free newsletter at PrometheanAction.com. Now, everyone treats this war as a foreign policy crisis with economic side effects. They have it exactly backwards. This is an economic operation with military enforcement. The war is the instrument. The target is the energy order, the one that has kept the world locked in feudal dependency on British imperial finance for the better part of a century. At the cabinet meeting on March 26, Treasury Secretary Bessent laid it out.
Mr. President, national security, as you always say, is economic security. Now, the American people and the world will have absolute security. Through your maximum pressure campaign, Treasury has worked to uncover all financial lifelines to the regime and cut them off. This is something that has been contemplated for almost a year. They find that the Iranian financial system collapsed in December. We have systematically weakened Iran's ability to fund operations and procure weapons, and that required months of preparations.
Iran's financial system collapsed 2 months before the first bomb fell because the economic...
And of course, that was Big Gay Patton, our favorite Treasury Secretary.
War began the day Trump took office. Maximum pressure sanctions, tightened enforcement, financial strangulation. The military phase was the finishing move after negotiations failed, not the opening one. And simultaneously, the Departments of Energy, Interior, and the EPA were unleashing American energy production, drill permits, pipeline approvals, regulatory rollbacks, making the United States energy independent so that when this war came, the global energy market wouldn't collapse even if Iran shut down the Strait of Hormuz. During the war itself, Treasury dropped sanctions on Russian and Iranian oil and orchestrated an international reserve release, flooding the market with supply. That is a move armchair generals would never imagine because they don't think in economic terms. This administration...
Yeah, that's a big problem with generals. They don't think in economic terms by design.
does. The battle plan was in place day one, aimed at breaking the transatlantic empire's energy control system while reviving America's industrial base. And General Kane, chairman of the Joint Chiefs, said it plainly at yesterday's Pentagon briefing.
It's hands-on work where one uncaught mistake or deviation can put an American's life at risk. A single misplaced wire, a microscopic flaw in a weld, incorrectly calibrated sensor could mean the difference between mission success or mission failure. The difference is measured in the lives of our sons and daughters who we put out around the field and on the field of battle. We rely on and trust in these great Americans, and it's not just their manufacturing skill, it's their innovative minds and their entrepreneurial spirit.
The chairman of the Joint Chiefs at a wartime briefing honoring the machinists and engineers building precision munitions in American factories. That is the language of the American system, and it tells you what this administration is building. So the plan was in place, the energy independence was built, the financial war preceded the military war. But here's where it gets really concrete, because the people who refuse to go along with the plan, they're the ones suffering now. Nowhere is the collision between green ideology and physical reality more brutal than in the states and nations that dismantled their own energy production and are now paying for it in the middle of a war.
Yep.
Start with Europe. The UK and the European Union, under the twin myths of the green energy revolution and continued U.S. support for the Ukraine proxy war, systematically dismantled their energy sectors and their defense industrial bases. They now have the audacity to lecture us about international law while displaying all the courage of a cornered rat.
Pretty much.
Britain refused to participate in the decapitation of Iran's military threat and is now begging for jet fuel. That's what happens when you hollow out your energy supply in the name of net zero. Reality sends the bill. But you don't have to look across the Atlantic. Look at California. Gavin Newsom has spent 15 years dismantling that state's energy production. The result? Nearly $6 a gallon for gasoline, which Newsom, of course, blames on Trump. Michael Schellenberger documents the truth. California imports 63% of its crude oil from foreign countries, including the embattled Gulf states, despite sitting on 1.7 billion barrels of proven reserves. Think about that. In the middle of the war,
California, yeah, it's so crazy to think about, but California basically has its own cowboy culture, huge amounts of ranching and oil production. It was a big oil producer for a long time. And then you have these green commies in California basically destroying their infrastructure because they think they can get away with it, and they have no problem taking in all their oil in from like places like South Korea, where it's being refined by they have no problem buying Russian black market oil to try and feed their people. It's not going to work, and it's going to get a lot of people killed if someone doesn't start talking about it.
That has disrupted global supply through the Strait of Hormuz. California is dependent on foreign oil it doesn't need to import. That is not bad luck. That is policy, insane policy. Mm-hmm. And the people of California are paying for it at every pump every single day. And California isn't alone. New York, Illinois, Washington states, every blue state that adopted aggressive green mandates, blocked pipelines, banned fracking, or shut down refining capacity is now watching its residents get crushed at the pump. Now, contrast that with the states that embraced drill, baby, drill. Texas, North Dakota, Pennsylvania, New Mexico. They leaned into the president's energy agenda. Their consumers are buffered. They know the future is ahead. Their industries are expanding. They have leverage, not dependency. And their governors aren't blaming the president for a crisis they created themselves. This is the proof of concept for everything the administration has been building. The states and the nations that aligned with Trump's energy revolution are thriving. The ones that clung to the green fantasy are exposed, and their people are paying the price in real dollars every single day. The war didn't create this divide, it revealed it. The war is ending on a defined timeline, driven by Donald Trump and America's Gulf allies, not NATO, not the UN, and not even particularly Israel. Iran's own president has said Tehran has the will to end it.
Yep. The civilian government, I maintain, would be the structure to how you do this.
The decisive days are here. The battle plan was in place on day one. primarily economic, aimed at ending the transatlantic empire's energy control system. Iran's financial system was broken months before the first bombs fell. The energy independence was built in advance. Nothing about this was accidental or chaotic. And the states and nations that refuse to build, refuse to drill, refuse to produce, they're living proof of what happens when you bet against the American system. Promethean Action is doing more.
So anyways, that's kind of the show today, agents, as Rock likes to call you. So I'm glad I was able to get out this thing, and maybe I will hear from Owen, but I don't think so, because we are just stuck with a lot of stuff going on because of the nature of this holiday weekend. I don't think I'm going to have a show on Good Friday because I'll be driving to Ottawa to, or not. I have to see about getting another flat tire fixed. It just doesn't seem to be ever ending, or it's got a slow leak. So I have to go and hopefully it can be patched, but I don't know. I'll have to deal with that tomorrow. And yeah, so this has been the show for today. Remember, TheSpyGuy at locals.com, and be sure to like, share, and subscribe. If you want to see more, be sure to help me out and get the word out. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.